Hello YouTube. Today I'm excited to bring to you a demo of CIS 3.x. And so this is a little new and probably the first time that you've seen this. And this demo is in preparation of Red Hat Summit, which is next week, and that is May 7th through the 9th. And that's going to be in Denver, Colorado. So if you're going to be at the Red Hat Summit, please stop by the F5 booth. Come chat with me. I'll have this demo in the booth as well. I'm just going to be able to show some small characteristics here, just really to expose kind of what we're doing and kind of show some of the coolness. But there's a lot more demos to come. I want to try and keep this as short as possible for next week. So the demo here is integration of F5 CIS 3.x with F5 Big IP Next, and this is specifically with OpenShift 4.15 cluster. So this is a single standalone cluster. I only have a standalone Big IP Next instance that is running or is added or integrated to Central Manager. And as you can see from the diagram, that CIS is deployed in OpenShift as an OpenShift operator or as a manifest. In this case, I'm using a single manifest. And all of CIS's communication is direct communication to Central Manager. So that's the biggest difference between Classic and Big IP Next, is that in Classic, all of CIS communicates direct to the instance via the AS3 API that runs on Big IP. And in CIS 3.x, all of the API communication communicates directly through Central Manager using the AS3 compatibility API that runs on CM. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit. But that's actually some of the differences, and I will talk a little bit about some of the other differences and how we've simplified this configuration. And I think that there's going to be a lot of additional simplification that's going to come in the future. And so as you can see from the diagram, it's very, very, very simple. I've got a service deployed in OpenShift. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a very simple CRD to ingress traffic into the OpenShift cluster. So Big IP here, think of it as my gateway. Big IP is outside the cluster and managed via Central Manager. And what's ultimately happening is I want to get traffic to the OpenShift pods, and Big IP is going to get the traffic into the OpenShift cluster. So the use case doesn't really change. It's the difference here is replatforming, utilizing the best of what Big IP Next has to offer. And so what you see here is available to test, lab, etc. I am using 20.2, which is the latest release on the F5 downloads. You can get an evaluation license or you can request a license for this. And so everything that I am showing today is going to be available as of next week. You're welcome to clone my repo and continue doing some testing. And actually the setup is actually not complicated at all. And so one thing that you will need to change is just the one URL for CIS, because next week we're going to post the beta release of 3.x. I'm just using a simple early image just to kind of demonstrate this. So let's take a look at this for a second. Let's go ahead into Central Manager and kind of show the Big IP instance. So I've got a Central Manager here that is running in my cluster. So here's my Big IP Central Manager. Now the cool thing is that the next demo that I'm probably going to show, or up and coming demo, is I'm going to be able to show the capabilities of using roles for CIS. So a role for CIS. So we're not using admin creds. But today I'm just keeping it really, really, really simple. I just want to kind of show the functionality, and then I'll go ahead and expand. Managing Big IP Next instances. So if I go to the Big IP Next instances, we're going to see the instance here. And as you can see, there's an instance This is my OCP Big IP 1 instance, the standalone instance. It has its IP address. I can actually go and click on this instance. We can take a look at the networking, for example. Now, because this demo is going to be node port, CIS doesn't need to create the static routes for OVN Kubernetes in this demo. But I promise you the next demo is going to be cluster IP, and CIS will automatically add the static routes for all of the OVN networks that are created. I'll show you that in the next demo. But this demo is simply just focused on node port. So in node port, simple just routing to the node and then from the node to the pod. Very simple. So as you can see, my device is added. And then if I want to go to the applications page, I will have an application, but this is actually an application that was actually created through AS3 separately. So let's go ahead and take a look at the API. So I'm going to use my Postman collection, and I can post this Postman collection. I posted it in my previous demo. It's very similar, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull the token just to go auth against the box, against the device. Then I'm going to go ahead and get the instance. And so I've got my instance ID. You can see there's my instance ID. And within my instance ID, I have my IP address of 178. So this is the instance itself. So now I have the instance, so I can actually go and get the configuration. And so you're going to see something similar here to what we were seeing on the UI. You can see here I have tenant 1 of app 1. So this is something I deployed using AS3. So I just deployed this outside. This has nothing to do with OpenShift. I was just testing the API, and I can connect to this IP address. This is just an app that is running here on my central manager that's kind of outside of OpenShift. I wanted to kind of just get connectivity testing. Yeah, you can see it's just a test app. And there's a couple of applications behind that. I'll go ahead and close it out. So that's basically what this app is. So as you can see, there's really no configuration on OpenShift here, just a standard tenant. So what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and create an application. So let's go ahead into the OpenShift. You can see here is my CIS that's running. I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about kind of what CIS looks like for Big IP next. And so as you can see, you can clone my repo that will pull the following files in. So the first thing is the cluster role bindings. This is pretty simple. This is creating what CIS needs to be able to work in the cluster. Pretty standard. I don't have to go into it within too much detail, but you can actually see the files are here. And so you are welcome to look at this. But there's really kind of no difference between what we were doing in 2.x to what we're doing in 3.x. And so not too worried about that, but you have to load that in. The next is the custom resource definitions. So our first beta, we're going to be releasing as a resource the CRDs. These are very similar to the CRDs within 2.x. I hope the goal is to be able to leverage the same CRD. And so that's why it was so important to not rename or rechange this, because I didn't want to create a new name. I wanted to be able to utilize the same names that was in 2.x, and so that you could just literally just go from 2.x to 3.x, potentially just using the same schema with maybe some modifications or some additions or some upgrades. And that maybe just be because of feature parity between Classic and Next. And I think a lot of that stuff, I know for a fact all of that stuff will come. It's just within time. And so that's why this is a 3.x and not a new name. And initially we were thinking about a new name, but I'm glad we stuck with CIS 3.x because it's kind of stands out. And then the next one is obviously the CIS implementation itself. Now, you can see here that I'm obviously just pulling in custom build. We will give you a build for 3.x, But what we've done is we've simplified the deployment options. This is what I really like. I wanted to make this as simple as possible. So when you deploy CIS or you restart in CIS, you're not having a lot of deployment options. And by doing this, we're kind of following like the traditions of Gateway API. And CIS 3.x will adopt Gateway API, definitely this year sometime. And so here we just we're using managed CRDs. Here's my creds file, and I'm pulling my files from a directory. My log level, and there's no verification of SSL. But the actual configuration itself is actually within this file. So there's a system file called CIS config. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so maybe one CIS could look at different files. That's kind of like the thought here. And so it's almost similar to like a gateway. So this is the manifest. This is the deployment operator. And then it kind of pulls in this, what we call this configuration file. And so that's my deployment file. So that's like the next step. So the deployment file is real simple. And so the deployment file kind of talks about where CIS is running, the labels. It talks a little bit about the base config, like what is the clusters that we're looking at. And this is because we're gonna support multi-cluster. So CIS could use this file to pull in like multiple clusters or monitor multiple clusters. And so you can see here, in this case, it's OpenShift 4.5 Central Manager, right? That's the name of the cluster that I'm using. In this case, I'm using it's OVN Kubernetes. It's of node port. And so my static routing mode is true. But because it's of node port, it's not going to create the routes. If I change this to cluster IP, it will automatically create the routes. The AS3 config debug is true. And then, of course, here is my big IP instance. I need my big IP instance ID because it's targeted. And this is kind of where it's running. So this is going to advance for HA and all of that other kinds of stuff. We're going to use the best of breed on what's on Central Manager within this configuration itself. And so that's really all you need. Those items is it. That's ultimately all you need to get this running. So as you can see, the cluster role binding, the CRD, the CIS config, and then of course here I'm pulling in my user creds. So I'm just making a file. You can reference it in the file. I don't want to reference it in the big IP, parameters. So I'm just pointing to a file. I created a secret, and kind of off you go. You can actually, if you pull the secrets, you can actually see, and then I'm deploying CIS config. So as you can see here in OpenShift, you can see CIS is deployed. And if I go take a look at my deployments, you can actually see there's my hello world. There's actually 4 pods running there. So it's very simple. It's a very, very, very simple pod. If I go to networking, you can actually see the service of these pods. There is the hello world pod. You can see it's pretty simple. It's of node port. So that's listing on there. It's using the node port service. And so that's actually pretty, like I said, pretty simple. There's no ingress, there's no routes. And so what I have is I have a very simple CRD. So let's go actually take a look at the CRD. And so my CRD that I'm going to go ahead and deploy is actually pretty simple. And like pretty much what you've like kind of seen before. I'm using a transport server just to kind of like start with the basics here. This is like layer 4. And actually, it's very common to see a lot of layer 4 type stuff. So I'm just using standard mode, simple algorithm. My service is of hello world. My port, you can see here. And then I'm referring to the service that I'm using. And in my case, my service is of this hello world. And so that's very, 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 very simple. Namespace. Yeah, there's really nothing to this. You can see there's the service, the Hello World app. You can see the service here is of the Hello World app. So automatic service discovery. So let's go and create the CRD. So I have this CRD right here. So OC create -F CR transport server. So I created it. You can actually see the API. API kind of kicked in right here. And so if I go to, you can see right there is the OpenShift app within the CM dashboard. And of course you can actually click on this. You can actually see I've got some members down there. So client, here is the CRD, here is the apps. I can actually view this if I wanted to. It's going to actually view it in AS3. I can actually pull the virtual server right here if I wanted to do that. Open a new window, make a connection to that. That will be the very simple Hello World app that actually comes up. Actually, it's quite nice if I actually click on this, because if I click on the stats, and then the stats right here, yep. So the application was requiring but you could actually see, if I actually make this a little bigger, we can actually see where we're going. So the source IP, destination IP. So it actually shows me here where the request actually is. So notice this is the source IP. It's actually coming from Big IP itself. So Big IP itself is actually sourcing from that address. And this is going to 10.171.1.82. So let's go and take a look at these pods, actually. Kind of interesting. You can actually see right here, Hello World, 10.68. If I go back to the previous pod, .82. So this is actually the pod. So 10.171.1.82, and that is the same pod that I'm connected to. So you can actually see it. You can actually see it right there. That's actually the pod, and actually that's the IP address that's coming from Big IP. So that is the very simple demo. So let's go ahead and recap on this. And so this is CIS 3.0. This is the introduction of the beta for CIS 3.0 with F5 Big IP Next integration in OpenShift. And this is going to work for Kubernetes as well. And so CIS itself is communicating direct with Central Manager. And it's using the AS3 API to do that. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me via YouTube, LinkedIn, contact your F5 sales person if you wanted to test this, if you want some help, if you've got some questions. If you're going to be at Red Hat Summit, please meet me at the booth, set up some time so that we can go ahead and chat, talk a little bit about this in more details. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please recommend subscribing. And thank you very much.